Recall Daniel 9:26 and 27, its repetition or parallel structure, specifically the upper half referring to the Messiah. Recall that it equates Christ's sacrifice, the crucifixion, to the making of a covenant, for when referring to his sacrifice, it uses language borrowed from the ancient biblical practice of covenant making, namely, it refers to Christ's sacrifice as the cutting of a covenant. Recall the description of this ancient practice. Flesh was cut in two, and the parties passed between the parts. Thus, Christ's sacrifice, according to Daniel, is to be viewed as his dead body cut in two and the saints walking between the severed pieces. Lastly, recall that at Christ's death, the veil of the temple was torn in two. With this all in mind, now hear what Paul has to say. By a new and living way, which he hath consecrated for us, through the veil, that is to say, his flesh. Hebrews 10:20. We need to take this in a little slower. Daniel 9:24 through 27, and the covenant. Christ's crucifixion, according to Daniel, is described in the following words. Messiah cut off, Daniel 9:26. Confirm the covenant, Daniel 9:27. What is being talked about here in Daniel? Jeremiah gives us a clear answer. The covenant which they had made before me, when they cut the calf in twain, and passed between the parts thereof. Jeremiah 34:18. The Hebrew words translated the covenant and cut in Jeremiah are the same translated cut off and the covenant in Daniel. Jesus didn't just die a sacrifice when he gave up his life on the cross. He cut a covenant with us with his own body. But there is more. Recall the scene when Jesus dies. Jesus, when he had cried again with a loud voice, yielded up the ghost. And behold, the veil of the temple was rent in twain from the top to the bottom. Matthew 27:50 and 51. The veil ripping in two at Christ's death is symbolically Jesus' own flesh being cut in two as God the Father cuts a covenant with us with his own Son. How can we be sure? Paul gives us confirmation. Having therefore, brethren, boldness to enter into the holiest by the blood of Jesus, by a new and living way, which he hath consecrated for us, through the veil, that is to say, his flesh. Hebrews 10:19 and 20. Paul not only confirms our understanding that Christ's sacrifice on the cross was the cutting of a covenant, but he says it was an invitation to enter into the most holy place, into the presence of God, for Christ's sacrifice ripped the veil that was a barrier to us, keeping us separated from God, and blocking us from entering his presence. Then said Jesus unto them, Verily, verily, I say unto you, I am the door of the sheep. John 10:7. We have an invitation, so let's enter in. Here is the most holy of Daniel 9:24, with its veil separating us from God. Entering in through the ripped veil, that is Christ crucified, cut in two body, we enter into a covenant with God. But what do we meet on entering? The Ark of the Covenant. And what is in that ark? The 2 tables of stone upon which are written the 10 Commandments. And what are we told concerning these commandments? He wrote upon the tables the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. Exodus 34:28. So Christ's sacrifice on the cross was the cutting of a covenant, and it was an invitation to come into God's presence, for Christ's cut body was the veil that separated us from God. But by entering into the most holy place, we pass between the parts of Christ's body and enter into covenant with God, and immediately are met by the requirements of that covenant, which are in God's throne, the Ark of the Covenant, and form the foundation of his government. Written on the 2 tables of stone, the words of the covenant, the 10 Commandments. Do not let anyone tell you God's law, the 10 Commandments. All 10 are not important. Recall the structure of Daniel 9:24 through 27. We will now look at the part that applies to the Messiah, the second layer or yellow part of the chiasm.